So, will this translate for Labor? Will it make a difference to Labor? This is a fascinating discussion, and I'm delighted to welcome to the studio former Labor Party President Mike Williams, who predicted this morning exactly what was going to happen. Also with us in the studio is Dr. Ella Henry, who is a senior lecturer in Māori development at AUT and a former executive director of Greenpeace. Kia ora, haere mai, welcome. It's lovely to have you here, Mike. Lovely to have you here too. And sitting in between them, Robert Bree, who is the CEO of the Research Association of New Zealand. And Robert, I'm going to ask you a question, and you don't have to answer it, but who do you vote for?
I definitely vote on the right, John.
Okay, great, thank you. Right, excellent. Okay, let's be robust in our assessment of whether or not this is going to make a difference. Robert, from a polling viewpoint, from a research viewpoint, from an analysis of demographics viewpoint, will this make Labor more attractive to people who aren't even voting for anyone at the moment?
In my opinion, if the election was held today, John, Labor or the left would win. But there are 7 weeks to go. So it'll be interesting to see what happens over the next 7 weeks in terms of the polls. In a way, I think Jacinda's got it's her competition to lose at the moment.
Why do you think that? What's your research showing?
Look, ultimately, politics is a battle of brands, right? So we talk about ideas, we talk about policies, we talk about personalities, but it's really about people making choices about which of these brands is for me. Is the green brand for me, the red brand for me, or the blue brand for me? And I think at the moment what we're seeing is Jacinda this morning talked about she'd never been called a fresh coat of paint before, a fresh lick of paint, I think she said. But in a way that's true. It's a bright new face. And I think in terms of what was the issue with the Labor brand, there were probably two issues. One is a failure to get their policies across in a meaningful way to the younger voter, not only the younger voter, but the younger voter in particular. But also it wasn't a very attractive brand. And I think that by putting Jacinda at the front of that brand, they've massively increased the likability of the brand overnight.
Ella Henry, I want to come to you in a sec, because I want to talk to you about the people who aren't voting, aren't participating, and we're going to hear from a group of them, and it's almost slightly upsetting to hear them talk. But Mike Williams, can I come to you? Because as Robert was talking then, I was thinking to myself, you know Andrew Little.
Yes, I do.
And we are talking about him as a brand that hasn't worked, as the face of a brand that wasn't working. He took stock. He acknowledged that, and he stepped down. Was he pushed, or did he decide actually what was best for Labor was what he did?
It was entirely his decision, as I understand it. Those polls really took the wind out of his sail. He's been working his guts out. He's been all over the country. He's done a good job in terms of the party is united behind him, was united behind him. He's attracted some very good new candidates, and even in the Maori seats, he has got good, solid policy. The party is as well organised or better than when I was there. They've got a bit of money. There's a huge flow of money, I was told by the General Secretary at 4 o'clock, started arriving the minute Jacinda. So he's done a good job, but he just was not getting the word is cut through. And I used that this morning, and everyone's been talking about it.
Yes, they have. That's gone off like a baton in a relay, hasn't it? It's been passed around. And so he wasn't getting the cut through. Do you think Jacinda Ardern can get cut through? Like that phone that is ringing now, that's probably someone else trying to get an interview, Mike, about what's happened today. Do you think Jacinda Ardern can get cut through?
If she can't get it, no one can. She's physically attractive. She's very bright. She's a woman of great substance. And she has practically single-handedly put the issue of child poverty on the table. I think she can. What I can tell you is I live in a pretty female whānau, and they are absolutely fizzing with the idea. Yes, I think she can, but I think you've got to see this as a pair. And I think the real stroke of genius is adding Kelvin Davis into the mix.
And can we bring in Ella Henry here, Dr. Ella Henry? And I'm sorry to come to you last, but I want to come to some vox pops off the back of you. So you lead to them rather beautifully. More people didn't vote than voted for Labor. One of the groups that has the lowest turnouts is Māori. Another group that has a very low turnout, only I think 40% or something, is 18 to 24-year-olds. Is this going to make the blindest piece of difference to those constituencies?
I'd like to think that any kind of change in the political process at the moment will bring more, particularly of our rangatahi young Māori and Pacific Islanders into the fold. I'm optimistic in a small way that the work that was being done over the last year or so by marae to feed the homeless, to bring the homeless into a community, may engage those people more in a sense of community. The reality is, though, we're not going to know what's in their minds because they don't have the infrastructure to participate in polls. You know, they don't have a phone, or if they do, they're not going to be like fizzing to watch radio, listen to Radio New Zealand on it. So we don't know what they're going to do. They are literally the great unknown. And I'd like to think that the media that's been generated in the last couple of weeks that's put New Zealand women to the forefront, like Materia last week and Jacinda this week, is actually going to get to resonate with them.
And you have seen a commensurate rise in the Greens polling, right? Since Materia today actually got them some coverage.
Exactly, and I think the same thing may happen. I mean, let's be clear, middle New Zealand, whatever, it's colourblind. If you own a house, a couple of houses, you're quite happy with a business-friendly, low-tax, no capital gains government. And so that disenfranchised population, the working poor and the homeless, we have to figure out how to include them in our society, or we've failed as a society.
John, we did some research a few months back as a research association, and we found that less than 50% of young voters 18 to 29, felt that any one of the parties represented their beliefs and values. So
isn't that sad? Isn't that terribly sad?
Which to me, when you translate into what causes voter non-participation, not having a set of options that you feel is relevant to you is a big part of it.
Dr. Ali Henry, I found that fascinating, and I've done a lot of interviewing with people in that shopping mall, and I find them to be engaged, articulate, opinionated, and yet when they were asked about Labour Party politics, they just didn't. What? No care? What's the failure there? What's gone wrong?
This is speaking loud and long to all of the Labour community and activists and politicians, is that they have to go out there and address those. They have to get to know those people. And I know it's hard when you're in opposition and you don't have the resources of the party in power. But clearly, there's not enough getting out and talking to the people. Because this is what I know about Māori people. I'd love it if we voted for brands, but unfortunately, we vote with our hearts. We're tragic.
That's true.
We actually vote with our hearts, and once we engage with you, and there's kanohi ki te kanohi, there's eye contact, then you can take our hearts. So there's some work to be done in that community.
And Mike Williams, does the Labour Party know that?
They do know that. I did a hell of a lot of work on the non-vote in between 2002 and 2005.
So that was the last election Labour won, 2005,
That's right.
And getting the non-vote out was material.
Well, you saw it happen on election night. Remember all those South Auckland seats came in with very high party votes?
That's right. They came in late at night and it was just a big whoosh for Labour.
Now, that can be done again. Now, there's a couple of things were happening there. This is the election where Don Brash was going to restore market values to state rentals. So a lot of these people were threatened with a rent rise. So that's why they got out and voted Labour. But as Ella said, there is absolutely no substitute for going face to face. And what the Labour candidates and activists have got to do is walk around in those food halls and actually eyeball these people, because that's what sticks in your mind. And I've done that endlessly with Helen Clark.
And I know Louise has done an extraordinary job around where she lives in Manurewa, but it's literally the whole party really has to get behind those places where the silent voters are.
But what I would say is that a lot of these people simply don't realise that politics is relevant to them, that their low wages are because of government policies.
But isn't that a failure of politics to persuade them that it's relevant? Rob Bree, you were a researcher. Isn't that actually a failure of effort by our politicians if they haven't managed to persuade those people that politics matters, what have they done?
You're absolutely right. Look, politics is largely played out in the mainstream media. The people we just saw in those interviews, they're not engaged with the news. They're not engaged with the newspapers. They're not listening to this show. And the people who are tend to vote for the right. So the Labor Party, if they're going to win the next election, they have to engage at the street level. But one of the things I just thought we should add in, John, is voter participation in New Zealand is actually relatively high. We're in the top 10. 73% of New Zealanders actually do participate in the elections. The highest in the world is Belgium at 87%. So we're not that far behind, but unfortunately there's a very large chunk of voters who probably would vote on the left if they voted, and Labor's not getting them.
Yeah, this is a fascinating conversation. I'm so delighted to have the three of you here. Thank you. We have 3 minutes to go. Ella Henry, Dr. Ella Henry, what does the Labor Party have to do? And what was Andrew Little suggesting they do by departing?
Yeah, I mean, I think he's an honourable person who could see the writing on the wall. It may have been strategically not the best thing to do precisely at this time, but I do think that that will resonate with old Labor supporters. My view is that the Labor Party has to get itself together and come up with what I would call a counter-hegemony. You know, reconstruct a narrative where they are relevant, because for 9 years, New Zealanders have struggled to see where they fit in the landscape and have drifted off to other places.
Okay, Rob Bree, what do the Nats have to do then if that narrative is going to be constructed? What do the Nats have to do to say, no, our narrative's best?
Yeah, look. I think maybe if we talk about Labor first, Labor need to simplify their messages. At the moment, their messages aren't getting cut through. And they probably need to get down to 3 very core messages around housing, employment, and they need to be able to have that economic debate that the National Party is so good at having. What do National need to do? At the moment, they'll be just regrouping and looking at, what are Labor's strengths and Labor's weaknesses. I guess they've got to continue to argue the relevance for the economic model that they're pushing, which, as Ella touched on, is relevant for maybe 80% of us. But there's a big 20% who are missing out. And National are going to have to figure out how they're going to manage that, particularly in Auckland, particularly around homelessness and poverty, and particularly around housing.
Mike Williams, you have had a long association with Labor. You know what works and what doesn't. Will this work for them?
You can quote me on this. National's in trouble. What people haven't overlooked is a slow erosion of the national vote. And what you saw with those 3 bad polls that were very bad for Labor was really a reorganisation of the opposition vote. Now, if Jacinda and Kelvin can get some of that non-vote and reach out to some of those national voters who are worried about homelessness, child poverty, that kind of thing, National is in trouble. Trust me.
Absolutely fascinating conversation. I can't thank you enough. Mike Williams, Rob Bree and Dr. Ella Henry, thank you for coming in.
Thanks, John.
Public radio works because people like you give us your time and expertise.